How many, what kinds of gods should a fantasy setting have? The DMG seems to have way too many for a player to keep track of. You could have as many or as few as you want. You could say there is only one god. That's fine. Or you could say, hey, there's 150 gods. You're not going to possibly remember all of their names, but why don't you design a god for me, and that's who you pray to, and that's who gives you power. Or you could take a small pantheon, or you could take a large pantheon, or you could just steal something out of history. You could be like, we're going to use the Greek gods. And there's a fuck lot of Greek gods. But, you know, at the top of Mount Olympus, you got some important deities and then a bunch that no one really gives a shit about. If you're going to design a game or a world that has gods, let's not worry about how many there are. Let's worry about what would be fun. What's like a cool cosmology? Maybe that cool cosmology is just like 2 gods. Maybe that cool cosmology is 100 gods. But don't worry about the number of gods. Worry about what comes before the number of gods. Worry about what are the gods? What is their nature? How do they work in the world? And what is their sort of like dynamic? Are they bitter enemies that are fighting each other? Are they like working together in some sort of cohesive balance that is like beyond the understanding of mortal creatures, but they're also like working together? Are they like the children of some like greater older gods somewhere else who have come to like make their own little tiny world over here, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing, and they're still young and kind of new to all this stuff, and they're kind of making mistakes? But then like the greater elder gods can be called in from time to time, and maybe player characters can reach out to the greater elder gods, but like they don't want the actual lesser gods to find out that they're calling in their parents. You know, maybe that sort of shit's happening. Maybe the parents are coming by and being like, whatever you do, don't let the kids know that I'm helping you out with this, but they're kind of dumb. Here, you're going to need this tool to do this thing. Here you go, but don't tell them that I'm helping you. And then the elder gods go back to their own game or whatever. You know, what's a cool setup? Maybe you've got like a pantheon of some number of gods that are fighting against like the evil AI robots that were created 10,000 years ago by mortal man, but who has now like fallen. But the evil AI robots who now are strong and powerful as gods are still fighting the gods. Maybe you've got like gods versus titans. What is a cool setup for deities? And then like design a deity or 2 or 3, and then come up with like, okay, well, you know, I got this cool god of thunder and lightning, and I got like a rain god, who I guess could be the god of storms. Maybe I need a god of the ocean. And then you just sit with those 3, and then as players ask you about gods, you can like add them on the fly and be like, yeah, totally, there's a god of rocks. Of course there's a god of rocks. You know what's great about the god of rocks? He rocks. Yeah. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. There's only the what is going to be fun to design, develop, and play. That's what matters. That's what's important. Hello, Koibu. Do you have any tips or tricks when it comes to world building the religions, and more importantly, the gods and the pantheons of the world? Well, yeah. What influence do you want your gods to have on the world? Is your world one where like the gods are present and they walk on the earth? Is your world one where like the gods stay in their celestial domain and empower clerics with spells, but otherwise don't actually talk to anyone? And it's like up for interpretation? Or do you have a world where like the gods don't come down to earth, but they like actually have conversations with clerics and tell them things, and a cleric can be like, yo, I spoke to God. God told me this. Or, you know, I spoke to the god of war, and he literally told me this conversation that you could have been present in the room for. So like, what sort of interaction do you want your deities to have with your world? What sort of concepts about your world do you think are important? And your gods are a really good place to sort of set the general themes of the world. In Arcadia, I have lots of opposite pairings. You know, we've got like the god of tranquility and the god of suffering, and those are like opposites. And we've got like the goddess of creation and the goddess of death, and those are opposites, right? There's lots of opposite pairings, and then there's some scattered like, well, you're just on your own. Like you're the god of inspiration and art. There's no opposite of inspiration of art. That's her domain. That's what Ephra does. And so each of these things sort of gives you a vibe for the important things in the world. Like, so what sort of things are important in your world? And then you can make gods that are in those domains that represent those themes, which you can then call in. So like, yeah, we're going to have a war. So like the god of war is going to be involved in this thing. Or, you're playing some bards, so the gods of art and inspiration, the gods of passion, and the gods of trade and travel are all like really important to this bard. So maybe they'll show up or participate, or their clerics will arrive, yada yada yada. So when you're building your deities, have a reason to pick the deities that you do, or you can just go like super generic and like grab some generally applicable themes that will hit everywhere, like, I don't know, life and death, law and order, order versus chaos, fate and time, nature, pretty generic gods. Like every religion's going to have a god who's in charge of one of them things, because they're really, really big concepts that affect just regular everyday existence. But I went with like opposite pairings and then some important themes. In the early days, the gods walked on the world and interacted with people. And in the later days, the gods are more hands-off. And like, if you go from the very, very first moment of the world to the very, very last moment of the world, the way the gods interact with the world over time changes. And so depending on where I set my campaigns, I can get that different level of interaction. If I want the gods to be interacting with players all the time, we'll set a campaign in like the Age of Heroes. And if we want the gods to have like literally no interaction other than like symbolic features from long, long ago, we'll set the campaign in the Age of Strife. That's how I approach religion and deities and pantheons, is like, what's the point? What's the value in them? How do they interact? How they interacted in the past versus how they interact now can tell you something. So even if you've got a campaign set in the Age of Strife, you can constantly remind players that like the gods used to walk all over the place and hand out magic and talk to people, and like clerics had magical powers, but now in the Age of Strife there are no more clerics left in the world, and the gods are, still up in the skies, but they're not here. Oh yes, these goblins are coming. Once upon a time there could have been a cleric of blah 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 who would have helped you, but the gods abandoned you and they left you on your own. And now the humans of the world are left completely by themselves as the elves and the dwarves overrun everything. And, it's because the gods abandoned you, and you can like run with this abandoned by the gods theme. Or like, it's because, people long ago chased the gods away, and like you weren't abandoned by the gods were driven off. So you can use like what it was before versus what it is now to like, talk for the gods as well. The other questions that you might want to ask yourself about gods and pantheons and religions are, how organized is my religion? Is it like the Catholic Church, where there's like one pope for the whole world? Or is it going to be more like the Buddhist church, which isn't really a thing, where you've got like different leaders and those leaders' lineages, but like, you could pop from one leader to the other, and they all have ideas, and none of them really say the others are wrong, but they've all got like different approaches to the same thing. And sometimes like the different Buddhist groups will get together and chat about stuff, or maybe they won't because they disagree with each other, but like, it's not so much a hierarchical thing. It's more of like a school of thought thing, and you can like visit different schools of thought. Or is it going to be like each local region, each town has its own mini hierarchy, but the towns don't have hierarchies in between them? So like, you can go to one town and like there's the high priest, and you go to a different town and there's a different high priest, but they like vehemently disagree and might war with each other over their disagreements. Or like this high priest over here curses you, and this high priest over here might help you out. But you still have like your hierarchy where this high priest has like influence on this region. The organization or lack thereof of your religion is also a tool. And if all of that is way too much for you to fucking deal with, pick a real world historical religion, change the name, change the hats, just copy that real world religion and just change enough details that people won't know. It's very easy. You would be surprised at how few details you have to change about something, and just pretend with confidence that it's its own unique thing, and people won't even notice.
Hi, Koibu. I want to make gods for my D&D world, but I don't know how active or forthcoming they should be. On one hand, I want them to be mysterious and not understood by the players, but I still want the PCs, especially clerics, to interact with them in some meaningful way. So the question is, how do I make gods interactable while still making them mysterious? That's a really good question. There's a lot of ways in which your gods can be interactable, and a lot of ways to keep them mysterious. So there's no one direct method. For a moment, we're going to talk about the mystery of your deities. Your gods should be understood on some level by you, and that understanding that you have should not be directly told to your players. We're going to do it in the show, don't tell method. So what we have for you here is this squirt gun. Right now, you can see the squirt gun moving across the screen. And there it is moving the other way. Now, what you do is you show your players the squirt gun. The squirt gun is the effect your gods are having on the world. What the gods are is the hand that is moving the squirt gun. So your players just see the squirt gun moving. They don't understand what is moving it. Is it a conveyor belt? Is it a machine that goes up and down? Is it a machine that goes back and forth? Is it a circular track? Is it a complex figure 8 track? What is the mechanism by which this squirt gun is moving? You just show your players the squirt gun. You never show them the hand. When you understand what the hand is, you will understand how it moves the squirt gun. And so then you just you show them what the squirt gun is doing. And then the players are going to try and figure out what is the mechanism behind it, what is the hand. So that's the mystery. That's the multi-tier system. And if you get really good, then it's like the squirt gun is controlled by the hand, but the hand is controlled by the brain. And so it's like this affects this, and then this is the final thing that somebody gets to see. So depending on, how much complexity and how deeply removed you want it to be, you can vary that depth and that layered nonsense. As for how to make your gods interactable, that is a little bit harder, actually. Almost by definition, gods have extraordinary amounts of power. If the gods create your world, if your gods are capable of creating effects in the world, if your gods are capable of causing storms or plagues or smiting people with lightning bolts, then surely your gods can do anything, right? If they want someone dead, the gods could probably just kill them. If your god wants you to collect 10 cat hides, surely your god can just make 10 cat hides or make 10 cats and kill them themselves, right? So why do your gods want to interact with people? You don't have to tell your players that. In fact, it probably is good if you don't, but you should have some understanding of what it is that your gods want from your player characters. And you should have some idea of how it is that your player characters get things from gods, if at all. Famously, gods don't answer prayers often. Or if they do, it's not always in the way that you hope them to do so. Judging by history and lots of mythology from the real world. So when we say you want your gods to be interactable, what do we really mean here? Is it that the gods give you a quest? Is it that your players can come to them for help? We want to make sure that the gods don't become a solve my problem for me button. The whole point of D&D is to overcome these problems together. The whole point of the game is the role playing and the problem solving and the having fun by doing the things. If a cleric can just say, deity, smite that person, and it's done, there's not much fun there. The way we usually do that is a cleric says, deity, smite that person, and the cleric's like, I'm sorry. Then the deity says, oh, sure, you're casting Sunbeam or Sunscorch. Well, that does 1d10 damage, so roll your 1d10. Or, deity, smite that person. Oh, so you want to use a cause light wounds? Well, go touch them and cast a spell. So usually we interact through spells or through enchanted items of some kind. Sometimes we act through messengers, like somebody shows up wearing a symbol of Malchus and says, I have a message for you. And then the person's like, but the cleric or the priest out of nowhere told me this message. What does it mean? And the gods work in mysterious ways. The gods have told or somehow informed to this priest or cleric that they should come and tell you this thing, and that's the gods interacting with you. So we need to find ways to make the interaction enjoyable productive, not overpowered, and a bit of a give and take, a bit of a relationship. And that's very difficult to do well. I hope I've given you enough to start down that road. Flesh out your deities, your pantheon, come up with some ways that you might want your gods to interact based on what we've talked about here today. But I think this is enough to get you started for now.